Chapter 1: The Moor of Venice. In the bustling streets of Venice, where the salty scent of the sea mingled with the aromas of spices and freshly baked bread, there lived a man whose presence commanded attention amidst the throngs of people bustling about their daily lives. This man was Othello, a figure of noble stature and commanding presence, whose origins traced back to the sun-drenched lands of the distant East. Othello was a Moor, a term that in those times denoted someone of African descent, though his lineage was as rich and varied as the tapestry of cultures that adorned the city of Venice. Tall and proud, with a bearing that spoke of dignity and strength, Othello cut a striking figure against the backdrop of the city's winding canals and ornate palazzas. But it was not merely his appearance that set Othello apart, it was his character, his unwavering integrity, and his unparalleled skill in the art of war that had earned him the respect and admiration of all who knew him. From humble beginnings, Othello had risen through the ranks of the Venetian army through sheer merit and determination, his prowess on the battlefield unmatched by any other. As a general in the service of Venice, Othello had led his troops to victory time and time again, his strategic brilliance and fearless leadership inspiring all who fought alongside him. Whether facing the might of the Ottoman Empire on distant shores or quelling unrest within the city walls, Othello had proven himself time and again as a warrior without equal, his name whispered in awe and reverence by friend and foe alike. But it was not only on the battlefield that Othello's virtues shone bright, it was also in the quiet moments of contemplation, in the way he treated his fellow soldiers with kindness and respect, regardless of their station or background. Beneath his stern exterior beat a heart of gold, filled with compassion and empathy for those under his command. Yet, for all his strength and valor, Othello was not immune to the passions and frailties of the human heart. Deep within the recesses of his soul, there burned a fire of longing and desire, a yearning for love and companionship that transcended the boundaries of race and culture. And it was in the midst of this tumultuous existence, amidst the clamor of merchants and the whispers of intrigue, that Othello's path would intersect with that of a young Venetian lady whose beauty and grace would forever change the course of his life. Her name was Desdemona, and she was the epitome of everything pure and virtuous in the world. Chapter 2: Desdemona's Love. In the midst of the swirling currents of political intrigue and the thunderous clash of military campaigns, there existed a sanctuary of peace and solace, a haven where the tumult of the world faded into insignificance. This sanctuary was the love shared between Othello, the noble Moor of Venice, and Desdemona, a radiant beacon of purity and grace amidst the chaos of their time. Their love was not born of convenience or calculation, but of a deep and abiding connection that defied the constraints of race and social status. From the moment their eyes first met, sparks flew, igniting a flame that would burn brightly through the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. Desdemona, with her fair complexion and gentle demeanor, was the embodiment of everything virtuous and noble in the world. Raised in the lap of luxury, she could have easily succumbed to the shallow pursuits of the idle rich, but instead, she chose a path of compassion and kindness, her heart open to all who crossed her path. It was this innate goodness that drew Othello to her like a moth to a flame. In her presence, he found a kindred spirit, someone who saw beyond the color of his skin and into the depths of his soul. Desdemona's unwavering devotion and boundless love captivated him, filling the void in his heart that had long yearned for companionship and understanding. Their love was a force of nature, a tempest that swept aside all obstacles in its path. Despite the whispers of disapproval and the raised eyebrows of society's elite, Othello and Desdemona remained steadfast in their affection for one another, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. For Othello, Desdemona was more than just a lover, she was his salvation, his reason for living in a world plagued by strife and uncertainty. In her arms, he found peace amidst the chaos, a respite from the demands of his duties as a general and the weight of his responsibilities as a leader. And for Desdemona, Othello was the embodiment of everything she had ever dreamed of in a partner. His strength and courage, tempered by a gentle kindness that belied his fearsome reputation on the battlefield, filled her with a sense of security and contentment that she had never known before. Together, they forged a bond that transcended the boundaries of mortal understanding, their love a beacon of hope in a world darkened by hatred and distrust. And as they stood side by side, facing whatever challenges the future might bring, Othello vowed to protect Desdemona with his life, swearing an oath of undying devotion that would endure until the end of time itself. For in the heart of their love, they had found the strength to conquer all obstacles, to defy the expectations of society, and to embrace the pure and unadulterated joy that comes from sharing one's life with the one they love. And as they gazed into each other's eyes, their souls intertwined in a timeless embrace, they knew that no force in the universe could ever hope to tear them apart. Chapter 3: Ego's Envy. In the vibrant tapestry of Othello and Desdemona's love, there lurked a shadow, a sinister presence that cast a pall over their happiness like a dark cloud obscuring the sun. This shadow took the form of Ego, a man whose outward appearance belied the venomous envy and festering resentment that festered within his heart. Ego was no stranger to the corridors of power and intrigue that permeated the world of Venetian society. As an ensign in Othello's service, he had long harbored ambitions of his own, dreams of rising through the ranks and claiming the glory and prestige that he believed was rightfully his. But beneath his veneer of loyalty and obedience lay a heart consumed by bitterness and jealousy, a heart that seethed with resentment at the sight of Othello's success and happiness. From the shadows, Ego watched as Othello and Desdemona reveled in their love, their laughter and affection, a constant reminder of everything he lacked in his own life. And with each passing day, his envy grew, festering like a wound that refused to heal, until it consumed him entirely, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of a man driven by spite and malice. But Ego was not content to simply stew in his own bitterness. He craved revenge, a chance to tear down the man who had unwittingly become the object of his scorn. And so, with a cunning born of desperation and a mind twisted by envy, he set about hatching a plan so diabolical, so insidious, that it would shake the very foundations of Othello's world. His first step was to identify Othello's weaknesses, the vulnerabilities that he could exploit to turn the noble Moor against his own beloved wife. Through careful observation and subtle manipulation, Ego learned of Othello's insecurities, his fears of inadequacy and unworthiness in the eyes of his beloved Desdemona. Armed with this knowledge, Ego set his plan into motion, weaving a web of lies and half-truths designed to erode Othello's trust in his wife and drive a wedge between them. With calculated precision, he planted seeds of doubt and suspicion in Othello's mind, insinuating that Desdemona's affection for him was merely a facade, a cruel mockery of his own naivety. At first, Othello dismissed Ego's insinuations as the idle gossip of a jealous rival, but as the poison of doubt began to take hold, he found himself unable to shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. And with each passing day, his suspicions grew, fueled by Ego's subtle manipulations and the damning evidence that seemed to pile up against Desdemona like so many bricks in a wall of betrayal. But it was not only Othello whom Ego sought to deceive, he also preyed upon the weaknesses of those around him, manipulating their loyalties and exploiting their trust to further his own nefarious agenda. From the unsuspecting Cassio to the innocent Emilia, no one was safe from ego's machinations, his web of lies spreading like a cancer through the ranks of Othello's inner circle. And as Othello's once steadfast resolve began to crumble under the weight of ego's deceit, the stage was set for a tragedy of epic proportions, a tale of love and betrayal, jealousy and revenge, that would echo through the annals of history for generations to come. For in the heart of ego's envy lay the seeds of destruction, waiting to be sown in the fertile soil of Othello's trust, and when the harvest came, it would reap a whirlwind of sorrow and despair unlike anything the world had ever seen. Chapter 4: The Deception Unfolds. As the tendrils of ego's deception tightened their grip around Othello's mind, the once unshakable foundation of trust upon which his love for Desdemona was built began to crumble, like a fortress besieged by unseen enemies. With every whispered insinuation and carefully crafted half-truth, ego wove a web of lies so intricate and cunning that even the most astute observer would struggle to discern reality from fiction. At first, Othello's suspicions were but faint whispers, fleeting shadows that danced at the edge of his consciousness, easily dismissed in the light of his love for Desdemona. But as ego's poison seeped deeper into his soul, those whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became a cacophony of doubt and mistrust that drowned out all reason and logic. Day by day, Othello found himself consumed by a gnawing sense of jealousy, a toxic brew of insecurity and paranoia that ate away at the very fabric of his being. With each passing moment, he questioned the sincerity of Desdemona's affections, searching for signs of betrayal in the most innocuous of gestures and words. And Desdemona, unaware of the storm that raged within her husband's heart, could only watch in confusion and dismay as the man she loved withdrew from her, his once warm and tender gaze replaced by a cold and distant stare. Try as she might to bridge the growing chasm between them, her efforts were met with icy silence, her protestations of innocence falling on deaf ears. Meanwhile, ego watched from the shadows, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his lips as he witnessed the fruits of his labor taking root in Othello's tortured soul. With each passing day, he stoked the fires of Othello's jealousy, fanning the flames of suspicion until they raged out of control, consuming everything in their path. But it was not enough for ego to simply sow the seeds of doubt. He also sought to manipulate events to further his own twisted agenda. Through a series of carefully orchestrated machinations, he orchestrated encounters between Othello, Desdemona, and Cassio, planting seeds of doubt in Othello's mind by insinuating that their interactions were more than mere friendship. And as Othello's jealousy reached fever pitch, fueled by ego's cunning manipulations and his own deep-seated insecurities, he began to see evidence of Desdemona's infidelity everywhere he turned. Innocent gestures and chance encounters took on sinister meanings in his fevered mind, twisted by the poison of jealousy into damning evidence of her betrayal. In a desperate bid to confirm his suspicions, Othello confronted Desdemona, accusing her in a fit of rage and despair of betraying their love with Cassio. Desdemona, stunned and heartbroken by his accusations, protested her innocence with tears streaming down her cheeks, but Othello would not be swayed, his mind clouded by the fog of jealousy that engulfed him. And as the rift between them widened into an unbridgeable chasm, Othello found himself teetering on the brink of madness, torn between his love for Desdemona and the poison of suspicion that consumed him. For in the heart of ego's deception lay the seeds of tragedy, waiting to blossom into a flower of sorrow and despair that would leave no one untouched. Chapter 5: Othello's Descent. As the tendrils of ego's deception wrapped tighter around Othello's mind, the once noble general found himself ensnared in a maelstrom of doubt and despair. Tormented by conflicting emotions and haunted by visions of Desdemona's supposed betrayal, he stood at the precipice of a dark abyss, teetering on the edge of madness. The poison of suspicion, carefully distilled by ego's cunning machinations, seeped into every corner of Othello's consciousness, clouding his judgment and distorting his perceptions. What had once been unwavering trust in his beloved wife now lay shattered, replaced by a gnawing sense of betrayal that ate away at his soul like a cancer. With each passing day, Othello descended deeper into the abyss, his mind a battleground where reason and logic fought a losing battle against the overwhelming tide of jealousy and rage. Try as he might to resist, he found himself drawn inexorably towards the darkness, unable to break free from the chains that bound him to his own self-destructive impulses. And as his descent continued, Othello became increasingly isolated, cut off from the world around him by the walls of suspicion and mistrust that ego had erected brick by brick. Even Desdemona, the object of his affection and the source of his torment, found herself shut out from his innermost thoughts and feelings, her attempts to reach him rebuffed by the cold indifference of a man consumed by his own demons. Yet, amidst the turmoil of his inner turmoil, Othello remained torn between his love for Desdemona and the poison of suspicion that gnawed at his heart like a ravenous beast. Try as he might to cling to the remnants of their once blissful union, he found himself inexorably drawn towards the abyss, his every thought and action tainted by the spectre of betrayal that haunted his every waking moment. And in his desperation, Othello turned to ego for guidance, seeking solace in the words of the man who had planted the seeds of doubt in his mind. With honeyed words and false promises, ego fed Othello's insecurities, stoking the flames of jealousy until they threatened to consume him entirely. But even as Othello fell deeper into the abyss, a part of him clung desperately to the hope that Desdemona's innocence would be proven beyond doubt, that the accusations he had leveled against her would be revealed as nothing more than the machinations of a jealous rival. Yet, with each passing day, that hope grew dimmer, drowned out by the overwhelming tide of suspicion and mistrust that threatened to engulf him entirely. And as the darkness closed in around him, Othello found himself faced with a choice: to surrender to the demons that whispered in his ear, or to fight with every fiber of his being to reclaim the love and trust that had been torn from his grasp. But with the poison of suspicion coursing through his veins, clouding his judgment and distorting his perceptions, the path ahead seemed shrouded in darkness, the light of redemption flickering faintly in the distance, a beacon of hope in a world consumed by despair. Chapter 6: Tragic Misunderstandings. In the tumultuous drama unfolding within the walls of Othello's heart, tragedy lurked around every corner, waiting to pounce upon the unsuspecting souls caught in its web. Misunderstandings, like venomous serpents, slithered through the tangled labyrinth of Othello's mind, poisoning his thoughts and clouding his judgment with their toxic influence. As the poison of suspicion continued to course through his veins, Othello's once unwavering trust in Desdemona wavered, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt that festered like an open wound. Despite her protestations of innocence and unwavering loyalty, he remained blinded by jealousy, unable to see the truth amidst the web of lies spun by his own insecurities and the machinations of ego. And as misunderstandings piled upon misunderstandings, the chasm between Othello and Desdemona widened into an unbridgeable abyss, swallowing whole the love that had once burned brightly between them. Every innocent gesture, every well-meaning word, became twisted by Othello's fevered imagination into damning evidence of Desdemona's supposed infidelity, driving a wedge between them that no amount of pleading or protestation could hope to mend. Caught in the crossfire of Othello's jealousy and ego's deception, Desdemona found herself powerless to break free from the chains that bound her to a fate not of her own making. Try as she might to reason with her husband, to convince him of her innocence and undying love, her words fell upon deaf ears, drowned out by the deafening roar of suspicion that echoed through the halls of their shared existence. And with each passing day, Othello's descent into madness continued unabated, his mind a battlefield where reason and logic were swept aside by the overwhelming tide of jealousy and rage. Despite his best efforts to resist, he found himself inexorably drawn towards the darkness, unable to break free from the grip of the demons that whispered in his ear. Yet amidst the chaos and despair, a flicker of hope remained, a faint glimmer of light amidst the encroaching shadows. For even as Othello's suspicions reached fever pitch, there were those who saw through the veil of deception that had been woven around him, who refused to believe the lies that ego had spun. But their voices were drowned out by the clamor of Othello's doubts, their protests falling on deaf ears as he descended further into the abyss. And as the tragic misunderstandings piled upon one another like bricks in a wall of despair, the stage was set for a final confrontation that would seal the fate of all involved. For in the heart of Othello's jealousy lay the seeds of tragedy, waiting to blossom into a flower of sorrow and despair that would leave no one untouched. And as the web of deceit tightened around them, the players in this tragic drama found themselves hurtling towards a final, devastating reckoning that would echo through the annals of history for generations to come. Chapter 7: The Fatal Confrontation. As the tempest of jealousy raged within Othello's soul, it was only a matter of time before the storm broke free from its restraints and unleashed its fury upon the unsuspecting souls caught in its path. Tensions, like tautly wound springs, reached a boiling point, ready to snap at the slightest provocation and unleash chaos upon the tranquil waters of Othello and Desdemona's once idyllic existence. Consumed by a maelstrom of conflicting emotions and driven to the brink of madness by the poison of suspicion that coursed through his veins, Othello's jealousy erupted into a violent confrontation that would forever alter the course of their lives. With the fury of a tempest unleashed, he confronted Desdemona in a fit of madness, accusing her of infidelity and betrayal with the ferocity of a man possessed. Desdemona, bewildered and heartbroken by the sudden turn of events, could only watch in horror as the man she loved transformed before her eyes into a stranger consumed by rage and suspicion. Try as she might to reason with him, to plead for his trust and forgiveness, her words fell upon deaf ears, drowned out by the deafening roar of Othello's accusations. For Othello, blinded by jealousy and consumed by rage, there could be no mercy, no forgiveness for the woman he believed had betrayed his trust and shattered his dreams. In his mind, the evidence of Desdemona's infidelity was irrefutable, the fabric of their love torn asunder by the weight of his suspicions and the poison of ego's deceit. And as the confrontation reached its climax, Desdemona found herself standing alone against the storm, her pleas for mercy drowned out by the thunderous roar of Othello's accusations. With tears streaming down her cheeks and her heart breaking with each passing moment, she clung desperately to the hope that he would see reason, that he would recognize the truth of her innocence and undying love. But it was not to be, for in the grip of his jealousy, Othello was deaf to reason, blind to the truth that lay hidden beneath the veil of deception that had been woven around him. And as his rage reached its zenith, he lashed out at Desdemona with words as sharp as daggers, each one piercing her heart like a dagger through the flesh. In the end, Desdemona's pleas for mercy fell upon deaf ears, her cries for forgiveness drowned out by the deafening roar of Othello's accusations. And as the fatal confrontation reached its tragic conclusion, the light of their love was extinguished forever, swallowed whole by the darkness of jealousy and suspicion that had consumed them both. For in the heart of their fatal confrontation lay the seeds of tragedy, waiting to blossom into a flower of sorrow and despair that would leave no one untouched. And as the final echoes of their shattered dreams faded into the night, Othello and Desdemona stood as tragic figures, doomed to be remembered not for the love they shared, but for the jealousy and betrayal that tore them apart in the end. Chapter 8: Tragic Reckoning. In the depths of despair and anguish, Othello stood at a crossroads, his soul torn asunder by the weight of his own folly and the poisonous machinations of ego. Consumed by jealousy and despair, he grappled with the demons that raged within him, his once steadfast resolve crumbling beneath the weight of his own insecurities and the relentless onslaught of suspicion that battered at the walls of his sanity. In his tortured mind, there could be no escape from the torment that haunted him, no respite from the relentless whispers of doubt and betrayal that echoed through the caverns of his soul. Try as he might to cling to the vestiges of reason and sanity that remained, he found himself inexorably drawn towards the abyss, the yawning chasm of despair that beckoned to him with outstretched arms. And in the midst of this existential crisis, Othello made a fateful decision, a decision that would forever seal his fate and plunge him into the depths of darkness from which there could be no return. Consumed by jealousy and despair, he resolved to end Desdemona's life, believing it to be an act of justice and retribution for the perceived betrayal that had shattered his world. In a moment of tragic clarity, he realized the full extent of ego's deception, the web of lies and half-truths that had ensnared him like a spider's web, trapping him in a prison of his own making. Yet, even as the truth dawned upon him like a cruel joke played by fate, it was too late to undo the damage that had been done, too late to salvage the love that had been torn asunder by the storm of jealousy and suspicion that raged within him. With grim determination, Othello set about carrying out his tragic plan, his heart heavy with sorrow and regret for the life that he was about to extinguish. And as he stood over Desdemona's sleeping form, the weight of his actions bearing down upon him like a leaden shroud, he hesitated for a moment, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek as he struggled to reconcile the man he had become with the noble warrior he once was. But in the end, there could be no turning back, no redemption for a soul consumed by darkness. With a heavy heart and trembling hand, Othello raised the dagger high above his head, the blade gleaming in the dim light of the chamber as it descended towards its final, tragic destination. And as the blade struck true and Desdemona's lifeblood stained the pristine sheets of her bed, Othello stood frozen in horror and disbelief, the full weight of his actions crashing down upon him like a tidal wave. In that moment of agonizing clarity, he realized the true cost of his jealousy, the irreparable harm that he had wrought upon the woman he loved and the soul that he had sacrificed upon the altar of his own insecurities. For in the throes of his tragic reckoning, Othello had become the architect of his own downfall, the master of his own destruction. And as the echoes of Desdemona's final breaths faded into the night, he stood as a tragic figure, doomed to be remembered not for the greatness of his deeds, but for the folly of his actions and the darkness that consumed him in the end. Chapter 9: Remorse and Redemption. In the aftermath of the tragic events that had unfolded within the walls of Othello's heart, the once proud general found himself adrift in a sea of guilt and remorse, his soul weighed down by the magnitude of his actions. Haunted by the spectre of Desdemona's death and the role he had played in bringing about her untimely demise, he confronted the true depths of his folly and the irreparable harm he had wrought upon those he held most dear. As the reality of his actions began to sink in, Othello was consumed by a tidal wave of remorse that threatened to engulf him entirely. Try as he might to escape the echoes of Desdemona's final breaths and the accusing stares of those who had witnessed his descent into madness, he found himself unable to break free from the chains of guilt that bound him to his own self-imposed prison of despair. In the quiet moments of solitude that followed, Othello's soul was laid bare, stripped of the illusions that had clouded his judgment and led him down the path of destruction. With his eyes finally open to the truth, he was forced to confront the darkness that lurked within him, the demons of jealousy and rage that had driven him to commit unspeakable acts in the name of love. And as he grappled with the enormity of his actions, Othello found himself tormented by a single, burning question that echoed through the caverns of his soul. How could he ever hope to atone for the sins he had committed, the lives he had shattered in his blind pursuit of vengeance? In search of answers, Othello embarked upon a journey of self-discovery, a quest to reclaim the shattered fragments of his soul and find redemption in the eyes of those he had wronged. With each step he took along this arduous path, he was forced to confront the darkness that lurked within him, to acknowledge the flaws and weaknesses that had led him astray. But amidst the darkness, there was also light, a flickering beacon of hope that illuminated the path ahead and guided him towards the salvation he so desperately sought. For even in the depths of despair, Othello found solace in the knowledge that it was never too late to change, never too late to seek forgiveness and make amends for the sins of the past. And so, with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, Othello set about the task of rebuilding his shattered life, one brick at a time. Through acts of contrition and self-sacrifice, he sought to atone for the harm he had caused and mend the bonds that had been broken in the crucible of his own folly. With each act of kindness and compassion, Othello sought to honor the memory of Desdemona and prove himself worthy of the love she had so freely given. And as he walked the path of redemption, he found that forgiveness was not something to be earned through grand gestures or heroic deeds, but rather something to be found within the depths of his own heart. In the end, Othello's journey towards redemption was not an easy one, nor was it without its share of setbacks and struggles. But through perseverance and determination, he emerged from the darkness a changed man, his soul cleansed of the stains of guilt and remorse that had threatened to consume him. And as he stood on the precipice of a new dawn, Othello knew that while he could never erase the mistakes of the past, he could choose to live each day with honor and integrity, to be the man that Desdemona had always believed him to be. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined him, but the light that shone within him, guiding him towards a future filled with hope and the promise of redemption. Chapter 10: The Tragic End. In the final chapter of Othello's tumultuous saga, the curtains drew to a close amidst a symphony of tragedy and sorrow, leaving behind a legacy of shattered dreams and broken hearts. Bereft of hope and consumed by grief, Othello's story reached its devastating conclusion, a poignant reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and the fragile nature of love. As the weight of his sins bore down upon him like a millstone around his neck, Othello found himself adrift in a sea of despair, his soul consumed by the flames of remorse and regret. Try as he might to outrun the ghosts of his past, he found himself ensnared in their grasp, unable to break free from the chains of guilt that bound him to his own self-imposed prison of despair. In the wake of Desdemona's tragic death, Othello's grief knew no bounds, his heart rent asunder by the loss of the woman he had loved with every fiber of his being. Try as he might to numb the pain with the passage of time, he found himself haunted by visions of her face, her voice, her laughter echoing through the halls of his memory like a cruel mockery of the life they had once shared. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Othello's grief only deepened, a bottomless abyss from which there could be no escape. With each passing moment, he found himself consumed by the overwhelming weight of his own despair, his once indomitable spirit broken and battered by the relentless onslaught of sorrow that battered at the walls of his sanity. In the depths of his anguish, Othello's thoughts turned towards the only escape that remained to him, the final release from the pain and suffering that had become his constant companions. And so, with a heavy heart and a weary soul, he resolved to take his own life, unable to bear the weight of his sins and the agony of his shattered dreams any longer. With grim determination, Othello set about preparing for the end, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions as he grappled with the enormity of his decision. Try as he might to find solace in the thought of joining Desdemona in death, he knew deep down that there could be no peace for him in the afterlife, no forgiveness for the sins he had committed in the name of love. And so, on the fateful night of his final reckoning, Othello stood alone amidst the ruins of his shattered dreams, his heart heavy with sorrow and regret as he gazed upon the dagger that would bring an end to his suffering. With a trembling hand and tears streaming down his cheeks, he raised the blade to his chest, the cold steel biting into his flesh like a lover's kiss as he plunged it deep into his heart. And as the darkness closed in around him and the world faded into oblivion, Othello's final thoughts turned towards the woman he had loved and lost, the woman whose memory would haunt him for all eternity. In the end, he knew that he could never atone for the sins he had committed, never find redemption in the eyes of those he had wronged. But perhaps, in death, he could find the peace that had eluded him in life, the solace of oblivion that awaited him on the other side. For in the end, Othello's tale served as a cautionary reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and the fragility of love, a tragic testament to the folly of mankind and the depths of despair to which it could sink in pursuit of its own desires.